to the Thursday, March 7th, 2024 Measure Z meeting. And if you will please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to use these, borrowing Tammy's glasses. Okay. So if we could have a roll call of attendance, please.
All right. Ms. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Cole?
Here.
Chief Robertson?
Here.
Ms. Campbell?
Here.
Ms. Trent?
Here.
Mr. Hansel? Mr. Zemer?
Here.
Mr. Bronkel?
Present.
Ms. Long?
Here.
And Ms. Titus?
Here.
All right. All accounted for. It looks like Sheriff Hansel is not present at the time.
Okay. So welcome, everyone. And I wanted to know if we have any modifications to the agenda that anybody has found? No? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anybody in the public, either on Zoom or in the audience, that would like to have a comment about non-agenda items? No?
There's no one on
Okay.
Zoom.
All right, seeing none. So we need the approval of the January 25th action item summary. And so has everybody had a chance to read those? Does anybody have any comments or changes?
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Do we need public comment for that? We don't. Okay. We do?
Yeah, we should go to
Okay, is there any public comment regarding the agenda items that you saw? No? Okay, seeing none, so we'll have a vote.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Chief Robertson?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Trent?
Yes.
Mr. Zemer?
Yes.
Mr. Bronkel?
Yes.
And Ms. Long?
Yes.
Thank you. And I did just receive a message from the sheriff that he's on his way. There you go.
We waited 2 minutes. Good, you're here. So I'm just going to say that today we have a quite an agenda, and we have our applications that have been received. And today, after our staff report, anybody that would like to get up and speak to their application is welcome to do so. And then we'll discuss that. And then next week, we'll have anybody that couldn't come this week to do that. They have the opportunity to get up and speak to their application. And then we'll do the up-down vote, just for you guys to know that that's how it's going to come down. So, Sean, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple things. I don't want to make this too long. Last week, the county, did start its budget kickoff process. So we are in the throes of budget development. This is often the busiest time of year for our office and other fiscal folks in around the county. A lot of calculators and spreadsheets going off right now. I did want to follow up on one discussion point that this committee talked about at the last meeting, was the reserve policy. If you remember, back in May, your committee approved 7-0 motion to create a reserve policy, or to create a reserve, recommend to the board to reserve some funding and use that funding to fund the outside agencies specifically, put them as priority, that were included in the 3-year spending plan. And so that's an action that your committee has taken. And the board in January adopted that committee recommendation. And so it's a loose policy. It's not very, very tight. It doesn't talk about how that reserve account will be funded every year, but it does have some parameters. So if your committee wants to get a little bit more detailed into a policy like that, I would recommend that in April, when this committee sends its recommendations to the board on projects to fund this year, that you ask the board to direct staff to work with the committee on fleshing out a more in-depth policy, rather than us doing it right now. But that's up to this committee to discuss. But I did just want to remind you all of the action that the committee took. Following up on the, our office has been working with Samoa Fire, or the Peninsula Community Services District, to submit a grant. We just submitted a grant yesterday for $1 million for a new fire engine, and we worked with an outside consultant to help them write the grant and make sure that all the boxes were checked correctly. And I'm pleased to announce that, pleased to say that Samoa is working with them again to work on an application for the SAFER grant, another federal grant. I don't know the details of it yet, but they're continuing that partnership there. Our office also worked with Willow Creek Fire to set up meetings with Senator McGuire's office and the Rural County Representatives of California, RCRC, to talk about the lack of infrastructure to fund emergency services along state highways. There have been no bills that were introduced this year that are on point for that topic, but we continue to engage with them and see if there's some way that we can get something addressed there in the state legislature. And I also included in your agenda a announcement from RCEA. They received a $3 million grant to help fund energy resilience efforts for fire departments. And so in that attachment, there's a list of partners that would be eligible for that funding. That's another exciting development. I also wanted to also attach to your agenda an item that went to the board this week, which is the list of projects, public works roads projects. As you know, the board at mid-year allocated $1 million to public works for roads improvements, and the attachment in your packet details out the specific projects that are being funded, because this committee did not have a chance to take a look at those projects that were being funded, so I wanted to make sure that you all saw that there. The board did approve that agenda item on Tuesday, and so that work is in progress. And I also attached to the agenda the scopes of work for a couple agencies that are going to be receiving funding for 3 years. The DTF agent for Fortuna and Star Ambulance gave us the scope of work. So we're going to be working on those contracts over the next couple months and have them off the ground. I did want to mention that Kamau Ambulance, I've been talking with them about a scope of work, and they relayed to me that the scope of work that's in the application is essentially the program, and they will continue that program. It's just a matter of how well that program is going to be funded. If the funds awarded by the Board of Supervisors is short of their amount, then they're going to work to find some other kind of funding. But the amount of staff that is in that application is essentially their scope of work for the next 3 years there. And I did briefly talk with, or exchange emails with the fire chiefs about their scope of work, and it's a little bit loose. I know that they're in attendance today, and they can talk a little bit more about it, but they talked about how dispatch is the priority every year for the $1 million, roughly $1 million that's going to be awarded every year, and planning services that is funded every year. So those processes are being worked out. Contracts for those 3 years are being worked out as we speak. And that is my update for this item.
Thank you. Will we be getting in writing that scope of, from the Fire Chiefs Association? Are they going to give you that information?
We will need to have that as we move forward on a contract.
Okay, and then
Absolutely.
we'll receive that to be able to view it. Can you just, for the public, go over the four? Well, we know that there's $1 million that goes to fire. Can you go over the other three? Just tell us what the amounts are,
Yes.
please.
So Star Ambulance will receive $137,500 per year. Fortuna, City of Fortuna will receive $200,000 a year, and Kamau Medical Center will receive $325,000 a year. And right now we have the fire chief slated to receive $1,006,000 in 24-25.
Okay, I thought it was a million, no?
$1,006,809 to be
Okay,
exact.
great, thank you. Okay. Would anybody like to ask Sean any questions, or?
I've got a quick question.
Okay.
Was there, sorry, was there a roads allocation? I seem to remember there being a roads component.
There is an allocation for public works. So all of the allocations for county departments were for departments that had staff. And so the allocation for public works is around $400,000, a little bit over $400,000 for the year, but that is for the brush cutting crew only. So all the county allocations are tied to staff. At mid-year, there was a one-time $1 million allocation for roads.
Okay, are there any, Glenn?
Just a process question. If I understood your indication earlier, you would like to start the consideration and ranking of the applications at the next meeting, is that correct? On the 14th?
Probably, yes.
Okay. In the past, we have on occasion forwarded questions to applicants and stuff, seeking clarification prior to that process. Would that, therefore, that make it appropriate that we do that today and communicate to staff any questions that we'd like to have that are clarifying in our evaluation of a particular applicant?
Yes, would that be after they've spoken, or that would be next? See, that's why we were hoping they'd be here this
Yeah,
week, then
certainly.
we could ask them next week, but if not, sure, if you have a question.
Yeah,
But they may answer it during their presentation.
Yeah, certainly.
Maybe we'll do that first, let them speak, and then if there's questions, we can use that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hopefully they'll be able to answer any questions. Any questions? Comments? Questions, comments? So, Sean, can you speak a little bit more about the agency that you're working with that got the money for the Samoa Fire Department?
Yeah, so they've, this agency is called the CSAC Grants Initiative. It's the California State Association of Counties, and they've offered reduced rates to counties to help them seek for and apply for grants, develop strategic plans for seeking outside funding. And this year, Samoa Fire, or Peninsula Community Services District, came to us and said, hey, you know, we really need to get this fire truck application in. It's a lot of work. We're a volunteer fire agency. And so our office submitted a $5,000 grant request to the Headwaters Fund to help work with this firm so that they could help PCSD submit a grant. And Headwaters Fund approved that grant. We got the funding, struck a contract very quickly, and they've been working with, CSAC Grants Initiative has been working with the Peninsula over the last couple of weeks to get this grant together, get a lot of paperwork together. You know, as you all know, these grants, especially large grants like this, require a lot of paperwork, analysis, outside analysis. And so they've been working on that, getting the narrative done, and just yesterday they submitted it. So the firm that they work with is it's a federal firm, and they have experts who know a lot of federal and state grants. A lot of county departments have actually taken them up on their services for consulting services to help them learn some of the nooks and crannies of some of these grants and how they can get certain projects funded. And just kind of learn from their expertise. And so those are free resources that they have. They're 30-minute or an hour one-time calls, so there's kind of limited things, but it's a service that they offer to rural counties specifically. But this is it's the same firm that the County Administrative Office submitted a Measure Z application for. So we can talk a little bit more about that when when that time comes for the evaluation. But it's been a great process so far with the Peninsula. They've been seem to be really happy with the service.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been asking for years for you guys to come up with some way we can help these other agencies. So this sounds like the gold pot, at the end of the rainbow. I'm really happy to hear about it.
I feel like, and I know our CIO feels like it's a way to potentially leverage additional funding.
Never can say no to that. Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay, so you all have your applications. And I just want to say that next week, when we are talking the amounts, and who's going to stay and who's going to go, or however we're going to do it, we also made the decision last year that we were going to, excuse me, be able to fund partial parts of agencies. And so when you're looking through your applications, if you could note to yourself and on your application so that you can bring that next week. And as we're talking about who we're going to fund or who we're going to, not fund, but who we're going to advise the board to fund, that you look at that in terms of partial funding. Because some, you'll see when it's very clear in some of them, they're broken into two pieces or whatever. You might want to go that way or not. But I think that this year, how much do we have? You didn't tell us.
Thank you. I probably should have
What-
led with that.
Yes.
Right? I buried
How
the
much
lead.
do we have to give away?
Yes. So this year, we have $4,131,890 to recommend. In requests, we have $6.3 million in requests. So we have $2.1 million, almost $2.2 million more in requests than we have in funding. There's also $864,000 in that reserve line. And again, that's in case our revenues come up short. We can fund those priority projects.
Okay, and does that include the people that are guaranteed the money, the fire and star, or has that been taken out?
This committee has $4.1 million to recommend.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and in addition to those projects that are already being funded, the 4 that we've talked about.
Oh, good,
Yeah.
okay. We got many. Okay, Glenn?
At the last meeting, I made the request that that amount be broken down, and the amount that was identifiable as essentially accumulation during the auditor controller's reign be identified, so we'd know how much of it was essentially a one-time accumulation of multiple financial years. Did you guys get a chance to do that?
So it's about $3.6 million is in our fund balance, and $500,000 is just revenue that we're projecting for the coming year.
Okay, apparently I didn't phrase my question well. The indication that we had previously was that as a component of this 4.13, a certain amount of it was an accumulation of recently identified monies from prior fiscal cycles based on the inability of the auditor controller to correctly identify those monies at the time period that they actually occurred. Of the 4.13 that you're saying we have, how much of that is that accumulation from multiple fiscal cycles?
Not exactly sure. We do know that, we didn't do that calculation, Mr. Zemer. But we do know that about $2 million of it was from the accrual change. That's where we're looking at taking revenue from July and August and accruing it back to the prior year. So a big portion of that $3.6 million that was in our fund balance was just from a change in accounting practice.
Okay. So maybe I'm beating a dead horse here, but it seems to me that it would be appropriate for the committee to understand how much is likely to be an ongoing revenue source as opposed to, an accumulation from one anomaly or another anomaly. Is it possible to identify, as an example, if I asked for the categories of how much of it was salary savings from savings from county staff, how much of it was savings or unexpended money on the part of awards to external applicants, and how much of it was an accumulation of, I'll call it, previously unidentified monies as a result of the auditor controller situation? Is that possible to do? Because it seems to me it's appropriate for us to understand if 3/4 of this money is essentially one-time money, that would change how I would evaluate some of these proposals and so on. So without a tremendous amount of staff work, is it possible to at least identify those 3 categories?
Howdy, y'all. I'm Jessica Maciel, Deputy County Administrative Officer. So I can speak to that. So as Sean mentioned, 2.4 million of it is due to the accrual issue that he described. That is a one-time situation, and so that will not happen again. As far as the remaining amount, there's a couple of factors. There was approximately 2.8 million in savings from county departments in the prior year. In addition, there was about 200,000 in savings from outside agencies, which equated to about 3 million, which got us to the 3 million plus the 2.4 million of accruals got us to 5.4 million. And then we peeled out the 864,000 for your reserve account. And so once that calculation was done, that left us with, I think, that's the 3.6 million. And then the 500,000 to get you to 4.1 is a projection of next year's revenue.
Okay. So in general terms then, would I be correct in making the statement that of the 4.13, essentially 3 million from the savings, both internal and external, and the $500,000 that's put in there? So in essence, there's only $600,000 of potentially recurrent revenue in this 4.13, is that correct? I'm saying 3 million savings, 500,000 against 4.13 would suggest there's only $600,000 of real recurrent money.
I would suggest that there's only 500,000 of real recurrent money, since 3.6 million is fund balance, which is as a result of savings.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't necessarily consider that to be ongoing funds. That just varies from year to year.
Okay, so we have substantially less than it appears in likely to be recurring funding, certainly less than $1 million.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Okay, Billy?
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize, I was late again. Every year our committee gets together, Jessica, this number could be different, correct? Based upon savings, based upon tax revenue, there's a lot of variables that come into play here, right? And so this committee's job is to evaluate what we have right now, understanding that yes, we may or not have the same fund balance next year. It may dissuade your opinion about how we should, spend this money. But we have this money that's in front of us right now to allocate, and that number, as we've seen over the last 10 years we've been working with this, that it does fluctuate from year to year, and a lot of different factors are in play. So I appreciate the report, and I appreciate the fact that we do have money to allocate this year. That is one thing that's very positive. I'm very happy about that, and so thank you.
Yeah, we need to get to that. Giving the money away. Okay.
But one of the changes we requested was the mid-year salary savings would be known, so next year we would have a more finite amount. So we would have it right off the bat and not have to guesstimate what's going to be allocated, right?
That's correct. Yeah, the board, again, adopted the committee's recommendation to make these awards one time. So they won't be, they adopted an action that said they will not be awarding funds in the future. But I will caution the committee that next year's funding, we are assuming is going to be significantly less than the amount that we have this year.
Can you,
Not at the moment, no, but.
like half? Yeah. Okay. All right.
Quick question. I wanted to touch base on the mechanics of the reserve as we've gotten so far. You mentioned about 800,000 was allocated to the reserve fund. Was that a reserve fund for our external agency allocations, or was that a reserve fund for county allocation?
So it is for the agencies that are identified in that 3-year spending plan. So it's county agencies plus outside agencies, but with this committee has said that the priority funding would go towards the outside agencies. So again, there's not an official, fully developed policy around this, but that was the action that this committee recommended to the board and the action that the board adopted.
So I think what I'm going for is that $800,000 that was mentioned, will that be included in the allocatable amount next year?
No, that's just going to be reserved in case we come up short in revenues, and it'll be to fully fund the projects that are in that 3-year spending plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? No? Do you have somebody online?
Thank you, Chair Campbell. There's nobody on the line.
Okay. So do we have any public comment on any of this? No? Okay. So, what do you think? If there's an agency that would like to come forward, is this the time?
Yeah, so this is the time for for this committee to officially receive the applications. It's also time for you to receive public comment, presumably from agencies. And it's also a time for, after that public comment period, for your committee to discuss any applications, any specific questions that you want to pose to any applicants who are here, or if you want staff to relay any questions to applicants. This would be the time for that. But I would recommend going out to public comment first, and then having a discussion where you can engage some of the applicants if you wish.
Do you want to announce that a couple of these have been taken off of the list? Or do you want to wait?
No, that's fine. So that is a good point. The application number 13, the Jacoby Creek application, they requested that we withdraw that application. I did just want to include it in the packet because it was already developed. It was actually submitted, but that $4,000 request has been removed.
Mm-hmm.
But that is the only application that is.
And Kamau?
Well, so the Kamau application is for $447,000, but that is inclusive of the $325,000. So they're not requesting 700 and whatever amount that would. They're requesting the difference between 325 and 447. So it's about 122 is actually what they would be requesting.
Is it 122?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's the math.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'd like to open it to public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to their application?
Go ahead.
There could be more than one fire people.
All right, ready?
Yeah, we're
Awesome.
ready.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Fire Chief Nick Pape. I'm the Fire Chief with Shuffle Cove Fire Department. I'm also representative of 17 Southern Humboldt Fire Departments as the president of the Southern Humboldt Fire Chiefs Association. Along with that, I also serve on the Humboldt County Fire Chiefs Association's Measure Z committee that helps put together our application. I just want to thank you guys, first and foremost, to extend my gratitude to the committee. Your unwavering support in the support of the fire services, EMS, Measure Z initiative in Humboldt County. Your dedication of upholding the original spirit of Measure Z, centered on enhancing public safety, has been commendable and deeply appreciated by all. I stand before you today not only to express my gratitude, but also to shed light on the pivotal role of the recently submitted application. Having personally contributed to crafting of this year's application alongside a dedicated team of fire chiefs, I can attest to the level of detail and regional specificity. Every request outlined in this application has been justified. With each allocation aimed at safeguarding both lives and property across every corner of Humboldt County. The request summed of $2.4 million covering a 2-year period is vital to address the funding gap from the previous year and sustain the essential services throughout the county, or the current funding cycle. It pains me to highlight the dire situation faced by rural fire departments in Humboldt County. Without the foundational support provided by Measure Z funding, these departments are not only struggling, but teetering on the brink of failure. The gravity of this situation cannot be overstated, as it directly impacts the safety and well-being of our communities. While I deeply respect the committee's stance on and integrity of its process, I must draw the attention to the fortunate events of the prior year. Despite the diligent efforts of the Advisory Committee and the Humboldt County Fire Chiefs Measure Z Committee, the funding was largely reduced by the Board of Supervisors, citing a lack of available funds. We were assured that in the event of a surplus fund, we would be eligible for full funding. Yet here we are a year later, reapplying for the same funds that were previously promised. In conclusion, I urge the committee to consider the pressing need of the fire services and community they serve. The allocation of Measure Z funds is not merely a matter of financial logistics, but a question of public safety and community resilience. Let us honor the spirit of Measure Z by ensuring that every corner of Humboldt County remains protected and prepared in the face of adversity. Thank you for your time and consideration. Any questions that you guys may have, I have a lot of insight in the application for this year, as I worked on it with 4 other chiefs. I'll leave my cards up here, and I'll be available for the rest of the meeting. So,
Will you be back next week?
yeah, hopefully.
Because
So
we're going to
that's-
be asking questions of the
Yeah.
agencies next week.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a long haul up here, but this is very important to everybody, and
yeah.
I don't mind speaking to all you
Stay
guys.
for
face to
dinner or
face.
something.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you
Okay,
guys.
thank you. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
But yes, sorry.
Brief question for the prior speaker.
Oh, I thought we were going to do that next week. Okay, go ahead.
What they want, they want.
So as part of the Board of Supervisors' 3-year spending plan, they're allocating $1 million toward fire
Absolutely.
for next year.
Yeah.
And then in your application, the request is for $2.4 million. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the need is for a total of $3.4 million for fire?
That's correct.
Okay.
Do you have me elaborate, or is that, do you just want me to clarify what the total was?
I was looking for clarification in much the same way that the Kimwa ambulance
Yeah.
put an application in that also covered or included the monies that were allocated by the Board of Supervisors, and the net amount of money they were requesting was much lower.
Yeah. So historically, Fire Chiefs Association, we have received anywhere from $2.4 to $2.8 million a year from the Measure Z process. We've been as low as about 1.6. Last year, we were largely defunded on our request down to around $600,000. $600,000 for 42 fire departments, pretty much paid for our dispatching fees, and then the county's planning services that helps us look into other funding options. So we look at fire district formation, grants, fire safe councils, stuff like that. This request is to make up for the defunding last year, including the $1 million, and then the $2.4 million request is for fiscal year 24-25. If that clarifies it.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Afternoon. I'm Steve Finch, the Road Division Manager for Humboldt County Public Works. We have 6 applications. If you guys want me to go through each one of them, I can, and explain them to you. Is that what you'd like? Might take a while. So the chip seal is for 2 miles of Mattoll Road. We asked for some money for Mattoll Road last year, and we didn't get it, so this is to go back and try and finish that. Number 2 on our list is equipment. We have 3 pieces of equipment that the California Air Quality Board has shut down, and so we can't use them. One is our water truck that takes care of grading about 300 miles of road, dirt road. The other one is a truck and transfer, dump truck, and the other one is our crane, and that does all of our K-rail. That does it takes us and lets us do high limb tree trimming, and there's lots of stuff. We put a basket on it, or we put a hook on it that opens culverts, or we move K-rail. It's vital. to what we do. But anyways, all those are shut down right now, and we don't have the funds to replace them. We are going to be coming up on 2027 where we have about 20 pieces of equipment that are going to be shut down too. And so we're hurting in that regard. Number 4 is Elk River Road, and that's to grind and replace. It's basically the same as some of the projects that we got that $1 million for. And it's not going to fix the whole road. None of these are going to fix the whole road. There's just going to be help fix the bad spots that are the worst. West Haven this one is a turn radius on West Haven Road that the fire trucks and large trucks are having to go out into the dirt embankment. And it's for $25,000. It's not a big project, but it'll save the trucks from going out into the mud, and it's kind of off kilter, so it kind of tips them when they go through. And then Kathy Road is the final one, and that is a one-way in and one-way out for lots of residents down by Miranda, and it is also the access for several cell towers that they have to be able to get to, and it's in disrepair too. So those are our 6 asks.
Thank you. Come back next week in case we have questions.
All right.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Did you want to ask? Okay.
Was that the order in priority? Did
Yes,
you?
ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Do you want to speak to your application?
Sure, yeah, so the county administrative office's application is application number 9. This is, as I alluded to before, this is a potential way to use Measure Z to leverage more funds. We know that Measure Z is probably not going to have as much money as we have this year. It's an innovative way, I believe, to develop a strategic plan for all of our Measure Z applicants. This would allow them to engage with consultants and come back and lay out all the needs for these different applicants and ways that we can satisfy their needs with funding sources that they may not realize. It could also allow us to use Measure Z strategically in the future to perhaps use Measure Z as a match for some grants and things like that. I think it just opens up a lot of avenues to leverage more funding for Measure Z and allow us to get a little bit more strategic with it. So I also need to say too that this is an application that can be sized. If we're looking at reductions and things in the spirit of teamwork, Measure Z, is that this, as it stands now, this application would be the whole kit and caboodle. It would allow us to engage with all of these applicants. We can reduce it down to about $110,000, and it would give us a narrower scope and allow the consultants to write fewer grants. But I'm just putting that out there out in front so that this committee knows that that's a it's up to the committee, the way that you all, if you want to recommend this to the board. There's different versions of the way that we can do this because it's a professional service and it's not direct staff. So that's an innovative idea, and I believe in our office is pretty excited about it.
So you said all applicants, so even if we don't fund an applicant, they still have access?
That's correct.
Oh, that's nice.
Mhm.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question on that. So that service could be used for, like, there's a request for a fire truck in here. Stuff like that, it could be used for, or if the sheriff needed another car, it could be used for that?
Yes, we could. We would set up meetings with every agency in here and engage with them and see if they need help writing grants or exploring different needs that they have and finding grants that match with them. So it can be for any of these agencies. We'd meet with them, find out what their needs are, and see where the best place to point those efforts for that professional service.
Okay, Billy?
One of the things too is, there's COPS grants that are out there, federal grants that pay for partial funding for law enforcement officers. And so this funding could be leveraged throughout the county, through all law enforcement agencies. And so we don't have the bandwidth oftentimes to look and start reaching into these grants. that come up. And we're unique here in Humboldt County because we have tribal territories, we're along the ocean, we qualify for different Port Authority grants and that kind of thing. So it's worth our while to have this type of asset in our county. So if it gets funded, I'm looking forward to
Taking
looking into
advantage
it.
of it.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Is there anybody else? Anybody from the fire department, you're all welcome to come up and speak to the application and give a shout out? No? Okay. Is there anybody online?
No.
Okay. So I guess that's it, right? We just are we aren't gonna go through the applications today, are we?
No, this is a chance for committee to talk amongst yourselves if you want. But like I said, if you want to have staff go back to applicants and ask them some questions, you all can do that now. And you can certainly follow up with staff after the meeting as well.
Okay. Yes.
We've discussed partial funding, and I just would like to know the procedure of how we're going to follow through with that. I mean, if an application doesn't get approved by this committee, is someone going to make a nomination to partially fund it, and then it's going to go again through a vote, of this committee to fund it partially? Or is it just going to solely rely upon the applicant to break that partial funding down and present it to us for partial funding?
That's a good question.
It's a good question, and was talking about it with a few of you today, actually. And we can, as we've done historically, we've asked applicants to voluntarily reduce their applications, and we can certainly do that and ask people to come back next meeting with reduced applications. But this committee wanted a mechanism to provide recommendations on reduced applications. And so next week, your committee is going to do an up or down vote on whether or not something applies. The next round in the same meeting, immediately after that, the committee could go by committee member and ask each committee member if you have applications that you think could be partially funded, and then recommend an amount, and then have this committee vote on that, and that would be the new application that would move through the process. I would advise against disallowing specific things in applications, and instead of disallowing certain parts of an application, just reduce the application by the amount that a committee member thinks is for that service. Because this committee we haven't been able to really come up with a criteria for things that are to pull out of applications, and we've typically not wanted to dig into applications too much. But I believe that is a mechanism that is workable, is after the up and down vote, each committee member would voice to the committee, I think that X application could be reduced by X amount, and then the committee would vote on it, and then that would be the new application that moves through the process.
Right, it's not really up to us to say you can't have this or you can't have that, right? They would have to figure out the rest.
Correct.
On their own.
Correct.
Or maybe use this new agency. So does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a yes or no vote first, and if the application approves all of what Measure Z is about, then I guess it's a yes. If there's a part of the application that doesn't meet Measure Z, this committee can turn that application down, and at that point in time, I guess they can modify their application and take that thing out, to make their application presentable to us that meets all the criteria. That's a possibility, right?
Sure.
They can remove that.
Yeah. I'm seeing some quizzical faces, and I want to make sure that the process that I'm talking about is clear for everybody. So does anybody have any questions on what I'm proposing to happen next week as far as reduced applications proposed by the committee? No? Okay.
Okay. Well, yes.
two items for clarification. Application number 6 and number 14 mirror some applications that have historically been made by Trinidad and Blue Lake. Unfortunately, the staffing situation at the sheriff's office have rendered them moot in prior periods of fiscal time. Is that the case again this year?
Go ahead.
So they're discussing law enforcement services. So we're offering those services without actually putting a body there full-time. So it's their law enforcement contract is what they're seeking reimbursement for.
Could you help me understand the difference?
Sure. So right now, if you live in McKinleyville, you have law enforcement services from the sheriff's office. You have Blue Lake, we're not contractually obligated to provide that service because it's within this municipality. City of Blue Lake is contracting law enforcement services with us. That means that anytime there's a 911 call, anytime there's a call for service, the sheriff's office dedicates resources to handle that specific emergency at that specific time.
Okay, so it's not a position. It's
That's
simply
right.
provision of service on a case-by-case basis based on your availability to provide it.
That's right. And so we still provide random patrols, we still do traffic enforcement, we still do everything that in other parts, but it's just like everywhere in parts of the county, we can't be everywhere at once. So we're their solution for law enforcement at this point in time, so.
Next thing I'd like to do is request that staff direct an inquiry to the city of Arcata. Over the course of prior fiscal years, there have been some concerns by the committee personnel, myself included, regarding a SRO position that the city of Arcata had requested and then not filled. I reached out and communicated to Ms. Deemer, who was at the time, I guess she still is technically the city manager of Arcata, and asked for some clarification about the timelines and the extent to which that vacancy had occurred. They were reluctant to provide the information, I guess is the most polite thing I could say. I did get after a number of prompts, I did get a very carefully worded and I would say relatively evasive answer to my questions. So I would like to get on the record for the whole committee, since that communication took place in my context as the then chairman of the committee. I would like the city of Arcata to provide the committee with the following information. On what specific dates during prior fiscal years was the dedicated assigned SRO position in the city of Arcata vacant? Did that vacancy span more than one funding cycle? And I'd like to know some approximation. Ms. Deemer indicated to me that they tried to fill the position on a as available basis with their existing personnel. If they have any records of how much time was actually spent by patrol personnel and so on, completing the SRO functions, then I'd like to know, what percentage or a fraction of the time they consider that position to have been filled. I know other committee members, in addition to myself, that have concerns about this, and I think it's time for them to go on the record with specific information and not general, general responses that don't really answer the specific question. To me, this is a potentially disqualifying circumstance, and I'd just like to have factual information on which to operate.
Just a clarifying question for the sheriff, because I think we've talked about this before, but if the Blue Lake and Trinidad contracts are not funded by our committee, does that affect the services you provide?
It does not. They're currently paying that fee right now. And so this committee would just be reimbursing them for the services they already pay for.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another follow-up question for the sheriff. So if I'm understanding the contracted services part correctly, the baseline contract is that if a 911 call does come in, someone will respond.
That's correct.
Which is different than a city saying, we really want someone to be standing on this corner for X amount of hours per day, and you're providing at an additional cost, assuming people are available, you could physically plant someone within the city limits for that period of time.
That's correct, Bob. So in the past, we've had we've had a dedicated deputy to Trinidad, 40 hours a week. They were in the city limits dealing with city-related issues. And so due to staffing constraints, we had to remove that position and just provide the service, but not have the body dedicated there for 40 hours. Now, again, we know there's 24 hours in a day. Anytime that deputy wasn't physically there anyway, we were still responding, we're still responsive to all those calls for service. They just don't have a dedicated person there that's their person that is offering that services for that specific hours during the week. Blue Lake historically had 80 hours total, 2 bodies, essentially, in different patrol times, and Trinidad had 40 hours, a single person there. But at this point in time, due to staffing, we can't have those 3 persons dedicated there. But they're still at a somewhat reduced cost, so to speak. You know, we're still providing the service, but not the personnel.
Glenn?
Sorry to be.
It's okay.
Presumably, these contracts already exist between your agency and these 2 entities, and essentially what they're doing is seeking to transfer the fiscal cost from their internal budget to this external funding source?
Yes, and it's expensive. Law enforcement, obviously, we know expensive, and these are small cities that have a hard time, generating the tax revenue to provide the public safety services. We just worked out a lot of financial issues, differences between Blue Lake and the sheriff's office to come up with a number. And it's around $180,000, $190,000 to provide the services every year. And that's 911 services, dispatch services, all the service of the sheriff's office dedicated to the city of Blue Lake for the fiscal year. So we're going to enter in a new contract this next year, both Trinidad and Blue Lake, but essentially offering the same services for roughly the same amount.
Hey, Sue? Oh, I'm sorry, Tammy.
I also had a question on that. They got a COPS grant. COPS grants a lot of times have a lot of restrictions and a lot of rules. So will that grant work with the service that they want?
I believe so. I believe the COPS grant can cover most of the services the sheriff's office provides.
Okay, Sue?
I wanted to go back to Glenn in the city of Arcata. One of my questions for the city of Arcata was, are they one of the ones that are offering a huge signing bonuses for police officers to join their force? Because in my opinion, if they are, they could reduce that signing bonus and pay for their own school resource officer. So that's just a question I have for them.
I don't think they're asking for resource officer.
Diversion officer.
They're asking for juvenile diversion officer, which is entirely different.
I
They're not
understand
asking.
that, but if
yeah.
it's, I'm sorry, I just phrased what they're asking for wrong, but if they have the money to pay these big signing bonuses for police officers, why wouldn't this fit into their police budget as well?
Well, we
without
can have them
coming
come
here?
next week and ask.
Yeah.
And
I
ask
didn't
them
know if that was
because,
a question we wanted to ask ahead of time, or let them know we're going to ask it, or if we just asked us next week.
well, they can come in and answer the question.
Okay.
They, for a long time, were very understaffed. I know that for a fact. And now, because of their sign-on bonuses, I think they're almost completely full. So they may not have that money. They were using salary savings for the sign-on bonuses, I'm sure. And so now that they're full, they may not have that. They have 2 juvenile diversion officers, and they're asking for 1. So
Yeah, I
it's
read
very
that.
different than the,
I just wondered what their entire budget looks like, if they really have a shortfall, or if they really could fund it themselves.
yeah. I don't know. We'll have them come and ask. Do you want to ask them to come?
Yeah, absolutely, and I can pass on that question too.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? No, nobody online? Okay, nobody in the audience want to speak again about the fire departments? Okay, well, then I think we'll adjourn the meeting unless you have something else you want to say. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for all your work. This is a lot of work. I know, putting these together. Appreciate it. Okay.
Sean.